Okay, council is continuing our work sessions. Next up is the Clark County Jail Services Funding Research, and then we will be moving right into Clark County Jail Renovation and Expansion Project. So we've got a lot to talk about here. So welcome. We're anxious to hear about this, much awaited.
So we're going to do them in the opposite order than what you just shared. So Dave, our director, will be going over just a reminder of council on the jail project, and then we'll talk about the market analysis and then financial options and sheriff's office.
Perfect.
Good morning, Council. David Shuck, Director of Jail Services. We started our project about 3 years ago. Last fall I was here. We were talking about the survey, talking to our community about what they wanted or needed and what they would support. So that's what we're here today, is kind of a culmination of that effort and get some direction on where council would like us to go next. So anyways, could you go to the next slide, please? Again, just a quick agenda as we go through it, but we can go ahead and just move to the next slide. I wanted to share just a little bit of history about Clark County. This is the second oldest county in this region. Washington County was the first one, but a long history here. So in 1860s, that was the very first jail built in this community. And again, in those times, different jails happening. 1885 was the second, 1992, and in 1937, they actually built the jail on top of the courthouse. So it's been a long time. The 1984 building that we have next door to us, that's what we've had since that time. So 40 some years, and in that we've grown. As you've looked at this history and efforts, there is some consistency in all the discussions that have happened over the last many decades of what we need with the process, what efforts that we'd love to improve with this jail, from the sheriffs previously to these different community groups with CFAC in 2018, 2019 when they did their work, and then to our current efforts. And so as you can see, some of the previous conversations and the goals, again, creating a safe jail environment for employees, inmates, and visitors, right? It's first priority of this effort for this profession. Capacity, again, for the last 3 decades, capacity. 1984, they're already talking about how do we grow this, and shortly thereafter. And so again, just some of those different things. And then, of course, as you may know, with your homes or any other thing, as facilities get old, technology changes, efforts, different things. Currently today, our facilities groups are making door parts and different things because in 1984 in the structure, we just don't have that. And so again, we've talked about this in previous conversations, but just some of the previous themes of the different conversations, and then on to our current one. So next slide, please. So again, Chair and Councillor Belcott being a part of this, the stakeholders in this group to kind of really reach out, 12 different stakeholders coming in and to sharing from our law enforcement partners and their concerns about how much time their staff spend in our booking space. And sometimes that could be 20 minutes, sometimes that could be 2 hours. And again, our current structure, because it's made of concrete and blocks and things like that, there's no way to do some small remodeling efforts just to kind of fix some of these bits and pieces. But expanding some of the efforts with the new technology, I believe all of our law enforcement use body cameras. And so that technology and defense attorneys and others needing to use that, talking with their clients and different things. And we just don't have the technology to make that. We have different stakeholders around the state who want to do mental health evaluations and using telehealth and other things. And again, we have every nook and cranny in that facility. I know everybody on the dais has walked through that, and we welcome the public and anybody else that wants to come see that for our transparency on. We don't have space. And so again, this conversation is really just moving that forward. And of course, the population we deal with, their health and mental health issues that they have are acute in nature. They're some of the sickest. And again, we have staff that are dealing with that, but the room to be able to do that. So again, this remodel project and the renovation project that we've talked about is really to tackle some of those complex issues that we're required to do by the Constitution for that constitutional care or ADA or any other things what have come along since 1984, because that wasn't there in 1984 when this building was built. And so if you could please go to the next slide. So when we talk about the 2 different project potentials, it's the partial build or it's a full build. These numbers here are really just talking about what staff increases or the growth would need to happen to accommodate those extra beds, the extra inmates, the extra arrests, the mental health issue groups, and the different things that are going on. So as you can see, the difference is a little bit. The biggest growth in our jail remodel project is this transitional housing component. And we'll talk about that in just a second, but 60% of our arrests that are brought in, they are released within 72 hours. Currently, those folks end upstairs in general population. And so we have contraband issues, drug issues, and other things that happen from that, right? And so again, having that transitional housing, so as they come in and through the judicial process, they could bail out or be released because the courts say this person can go. We need that flexibility, and corrections work really needs that flexibility because we also have some of the most dangerous folks or the mentally ill folks or those individuals that are problems to themselves and others. So having a very full jail creates assaults and issues with inmates getting along and things like that. When you don't have places to move them, it creates this. And so having this staff right here will allow us to manage them more safely and manage them in a more effective correctional efforts that go along with the different projects that we've talked about at February of 2025 when we propose what kind of process, whether partial or full at that time that we had discussed. So if you could please go to the next slide. This kind of just places it in a little bit of nuance to what we currently have in jails with our different beds, the different posts, and the costs of our annual budget. You just saw that in a previous presentation. And again, what a partial build would do to those. The growth of the bed space, the growth of how many pods that are required, or how many posts that are required, and how many employees to handle that. And again, that's just corrections. It's not the program space where we're adding reentry or MOUD or other support programs that go along and are required by ADA and other things. So again, these are estimates, and this is the full build estimate. This project is a 5 to 7 year project, depending on the project that we select, if that is the decision of the council. And so this wouldn't be first year needs. This would be the growth of and potential at the end of the growth. So we could grow into the building, grow into the efforts, grow into the efforts. So as you can see, just the differences in the full and partial terms and those annual costs and the growth that go along with them. So next page, please. So as you look at each of those projects, you can see the different numbers and the different ads and the different efforts that the stakeholder groups put together for this renovation project. And again, this has some similarity to CFAC. It has some similarities to the 2016 efforts and even the ones before that. But as you can see, the differences there and what that really adds. And the difference is really building that north section of the complex. That is all a general population. It would be the north parking lot of our current facility, where everything else in the partial would be the existing building and then the south parking lot. That's where that growth in that building would happen. So again, in talking with KMB and others, is setting this up into, hey, we could build this partial first and then in the future have the secondary component when the community needed it, if they needed it in the future. It's real hard with that crystal ball to know what 40 years from now looks like, right? But we know what the last 30 years and the last 40 years look like. So again, just some different things. The other thing that's not noted in this is that the basement section of the building would become a secured court area where the public could come in one side, but our staff could bring inmates to a secured court to have their first appearances. Currently now, we transport them over to the courthouse. We come out of a secured area, we go into the public, through the public, and then go back into a secured area. And that's not very safe at times, and depending on what's going on. The second part to that is our sheriff's office is at the bottom of our facility. And so he would be displaced, or that office would be displaced, and would have to do something different with that. So again, just some things with this remodel project that would affect. So as you can see that, and again, if you have any questions along the way, I know you've seen this before, maybe in different formats, but just kind of a refresher for the public and yourselves. Next slide, please. And then here's the cost. And so again, as we've waited 14 months. Some costs go along with that. And as you can see, the largest really cost is that total construction estimate on top. And so again, that estimate, excuse me, let me get to my right page here. It's about $20 million difference on each of those, right? And it's up mostly in that total cost estimates. There are some differences down below there, but they were fairly small. And again, 14 months escalation from that November, it's about 4% a year. And again, when you look at those different costs, there are estimates on what that's going to be. And then depending on when we start, for example, the sales tax went up. For example, next year, different transitioning or getting material stuff to us could create some other issues. And so again, there's some estimates in there as we go along with that. Next slide, please. And then this was the previous timelines. And again, either of these would generally start in January of 27 with the design discussions and funding. Should this get approved? Should you approve? Should the public approve it and so forth? And as you slide those forward, again, I just use some of the previous slides to illustrate where we're at. So you can see it's a generally a 5 to 7 year project, depending on the partial or the full. And then what do we do with that? And so again, as we look at each of those costs, the taxes, the different things that would help to fund this would be able to grow into what a full partial would be. And for example, hiring staff, I wouldn't need all 178 or whatever the exact number is. I would need, the first year I think is estimated to be about 22 staff. And that's again, to get the officers up to date. And the next year it's another about 25 to 26 people. And again, because there's no way I could hire 75 in the first year. You know, we've done really well over the last 3 years hiring folks and we're getting staff in place. But again, it takes a little bit of time to get them trained and up to speed. So again, that budget, that operational cost would definitely grow as that continues to go about. So. Any questions about these just initial slides as I've gone through them for you?
Very nice summary. Thanks. Thanks for that.
Trying to get to the meat and the potatoes of this conversation, just
really good.
Just to make sure we have time.
Okay.
Just
Councilor Young.
one quick question. I know math always doesn't show the full picture, but I'm curious, when I did the cost per bed from existing services versus the 931 total, it comes out at a higher cost per bed with the higher number. And normally you would anticipate with a larger number, you would create some level of efficiency. Do you know what's contributing to it being ultimately more expensive to operate per bed?
Staffing, of course, by post, right? And so the different housing models and the different things. And so currently we have an indirect supervision model. So every post there has to be somebody there. When you grow your initial transitional spacings and different things, that initial staff is what's going to grow that a little bit. But as you continue, in the way I understand it is, as we continue to grow in that bed space or that operational needs, sorry, I lost my thought. Apologize.
Are there additional services that we intend? I mean, is it
Yeah.
the services that we currently, as it expands?
The medical costs go up because you have more inmates, right? So we're accommodating for where our mentally ill folks are being housed, right? And our medical staffing in different houses each of those programs do go up because of the cost of adding more inmates and population. In fact, some of our budget requests will be attending to that when we open up JPOD and some of the different things. So there are some very expensive costs that go along with housing the kind of population that we go along with that. So I can get some very specific information for you that might answer that
Yeah,
question a
I'd
little
be
bit
interested
better.
in
So
seeing that.
yeah, absolutely.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments?
Just
Okay,
that was pretty succinct based on all
Yeah.
the work that's been done. So thanks for that, Dave.
Sorry.
Good work. Are there any plans to run this by the stakeholder group at any point, or what are the thoughts there? Because I know we convened them initially. I don't know how much they've been involved since that initial
Yeah, so
convening.
we wanted to come back to you first, of course, and figure out our direction where that goes. We're going to bring back the stakeholder groups and have some conversations about how the plans have come into play from their input and the other stuff, and then to have this conversation. So we have some new players in Superior Court and other places are like, hey, what are we doing about courts? And I'm like, well, hi, we'll have that conversation. So yes, absolutely. And again, I have some tentative ideas on what we would do to potential election times for us to get our messaging out. And you're going to hear that from John about some of the gaps that we probably have in educating our community about the jail. So
Right. I'd be curious just about any feedback related to full or partial.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, we're ready to move on.
Yes.
John Horvick, Senior Vice President at DHM Research. A couple things before I get into our work. First, just thank you for the opportunity to talk to your community members about this issue. It was a real privilege to be able to do that. I'm going to walk through some survey results as well as some focus group results. Before I do that, I just want to say, like, I understand there's lots of inputs into this conversation, and public opinion is only one piece. There's important public policy considerations that are beyond the work that I'm going to be able to provide today. There's obviously the engagement that you individually are doing with the community and the work that others are doing with the community. That should all be important inputs. I hope this is helpful in that, but wouldn't assume that it is everything. I'm going to walk through this, and I think you are running the show. So next. So we did do a survey and some focus groups. The survey was conducted in January, so about 5 months ago. It's a survey of 600 registered voters here in Clark County. I'm happy to get into the methodological details, but the important things to know is that we take great care to ensure that it is representative on all the key characteristics that you would think: geographic, gender, age, race, education, all those different characteristics. We work real hard to ensure that they are represented proportionally to what they are in the community. We also take care to make sure we're reaching people in multiple ways. So there's some people who we reach by traditional phone call and administer the survey with an interviewer. More and more people would rather not answer a phone number, a call from someone who they don't know, and that's appropriate, understandable. So we also reach people by text message too. So they're sent a text message with a link where they can take the survey on their phone, or they can throw that to another device if that's the preference. But we make sure we try to reach people in the way that they are most comfortable participating. The margin of error is 4.0%. If there's certainly other questions about the methodology, happy to dig into that. Surveys are good at asking people what they think, or they're better at that at least. You support something, you oppose it, you like something or dislike it. And they can be instructive in helping us think about why, but that's not their strength. With the research approach that's better at the why questions are really focus groups. You'll see in the survey, we were able to keep people engaged for 15 minutes, and that is some good amount of time to ask people what. But to get into those nuances, the trade-offs that people make, how they reason through a problem, you can't do that in 15 minutes. And so for difficult challenges like we have in front of us, it's often recommended to do both some quantitative, some survey research, as well as some qualitative, some focus group research. So we did do four focus groups, 2 in Vancouver, 2 in Battleground. These are 2-hour sessions where we presented people with information about they got to talk about the community and what was a priority to them, provided information about jail and funding, and then they could not only tell us what they think, but they could have a conversation with myself and my co-moderator, as well as each other, about what was important about this, how they think through it, the arguments that they make to themselves and others about why this might be valuable, or the concerns that they have. The results I'm going to present today are both the survey results as well as the focus group results. There are full reports for each of them. These are abbreviated for both of those full reports, but I'll try to walk through them in a way that shows what they think as well as how they thought about why they thought about the way they did. You go next. In survey research, it is often valuable, almost necessary, to start a survey by asking some general question about the community. And a question that pollsters love to ask is, all things considered, is Clark County or Washington State or United States of America, heading in the right direction, or things off on the wrong track? It's a good benchmark because we, us and other pollsters ask this question a lot, so we can get a real sense of how a community is feeling. What's the mood in the community, both across time and compared to other places? We would expect that people would be more supportive of, say, raising their taxes if they're feeling positive about the community. And that touches on all sorts of things, touches on their economic sentiment as well as their trust in community leaders, et cetera, et cetera. In Clark County, you can see that in January, 28% of voters said that the county was headed in the right direction. 41% said it's off on the wrong track. A good chunk, 31%, said that they're unsure. That's a higher percent than you might see in other research, in part because people, the salience of county is less than, say, the salience of people's mind of a city or state or the country. And so there can be less certainty about the county. There might be some other places in people's lives. But if you just want for context, the chart on the right, we regularly ask Washingtonians in surveys about the direction of the state. And in 2025, if we look across all the surveys that we did in Washington, 41% of Washingtonians thought that the state was headed on the wrong track, which is consistent with what we're seeing here in Clark County. So although that right direction number is a little bit lower here, I think it's largely because it's just people don't think of the county in the same way that they think of the state. But there is just, broadly speaking, negativity out there in the world. We are at a time right now, not only in Clark County, but across the country, where there's just frustration, whether it's about the economy, whether it's about political leadership, or whether, fill in the blank. But we are more negative now, less sort of positive about government than we have been in the recent past and certainly the historical past. And that is the landscape that any community is going to have to go to when they're asking their community for additional resources to fund services. Next.
Just really quick question,
Sure.
John, before we move on. So this is a very general question.
Yeah.
So you ask the question, they tell you whether they believe it's the right direction or on track, but you don't follow up to ask what causes them to believe that the county is either going in the right direction or the.
Yeah, in any survey, there's only so many questions you ask. You have to make some choice about what to include and what not to include. The next question I'm going to show on the next slide doesn't get at exactly what you're saying, but it will, I think, provide information about what was on their mind when they're answering the question. So why don't you go next? So we do ask in the survey, just, hey, heck, what's the most important problem facing the county today? And this is open-ended, counselor. So this is really, they can say anything that they want. We did not provide these categories for people. We listened or read all the comments that they provided and then put them into categories that sort of fit together. And I would encourage you, when you're looking at results, these results are results like this in general, an open-ended question like this. If, it's not a hard and fast rule, but a general rule, if more than 20% of people are mentioning the same thing, if more than 1 out of 5 people in the community are identifying the same thing as the problem in the community, that's a pretty big deal. And here we have homelessness at 22%. So that's, kind of near and just slightly above that 20% threshold. The other thing I'll say is I don't have good trend line number for Clark County on this question, but just we do a lot of research in the Pacific Northwest. And I'll tell you that homelessness being the number one issue has been consistent across communities all over, large and small, east side of the mountains, west side of the mountains. Homelessness has been a big deal. So Clark County does not stand out in that way. I don't have a number from, say, 2021 or 2022 for Clark County on this question. I strongly suspect, and it's influenced partly by our focus groups we did, but a lot of the other research that we do, I suspect that this number would have been quite a bit higher in 2021 and 2022. We really saw this ramp up in concern at about that time, and it has been ebbing in other places. So even though it is the number one, and I can't tell you that it was higher with certainty, 2 or 3 years ago, my expectation would be that if we had measured it, in a few years before, but it's trending that way. But homelessness at 22%. In the focus groups, people definitely talked about homelessness as it relates to crime, as it relates to public safety. So there is a connection between that and how people think about jail services. It's not the strongest connection, but it did exist. You can't quite see it on the screen in front of me, but in the packet that you have, We did highlight a couple others that we think are more directly connected, which is taxes and fees. 14% mentioned something about taxes, and another 9% mentioned something specifically about public safety. There are other things that relate to the jail or even relate to crime and public safety or taxes and fees, but just sort of thinking about like what's on people's mind as we might go to them with a funding measure. What doesn't show up, at least directly, right, is a jail, right? And that's not surprising. And, we could find plenty of things on this list that connect to a jail. But it is also important to recognize that when we ask people what's the most important problem in the community, it is not a jail. So it's not the thing that we might go to them and ask for additional resources for. So finding ways to connect that jail to the things that people care about and value, what they're seeing as problems, is going to be paramount for success, for sure. I go next. This is a bar chart, but actually comes from the focus groups. In the focus groups, we ask people if they're satisfied or not satisfied, and they can put on that scale from very satisfied to very dissatisfied with some services in Clark County. So public safety, taxes, housing affordability, availability of homeless services, and cost of living. We're paying a particular attention to, say, public safety and probably cost of living and taxes. Public safety relative to our focus group participants was the thing that they were sort of more satisfied with than other issues. So you had a majority of people saying that they're satisfied with public safety in the community. Again, as we think about what is the jail, how does it connect to what people care about, at least in our focus groups, it wasn't the thing that popped for them. Public safety wasn't the thing that popped for them as the problem. The problem that they were telling us was really so expensive. The cost of living in Clark County, cost of living for myself, is a challenge for me right now. A lot of that came up with housing. I'd say housing in particular in the focus groups is the thing that people talked about the most. And not all this is a Clark County specific issue. Other things that people talked about were, inflation, tariffs, things that are impact everybody, but the county itself has less control over. But we're dealing in an environment where people are more satisfied with public safety. There's challenges that they were able to articulate, but very concerned about the affordability. And again, just in an environment we're trying to ask people to pay for additional money for services, there's this sort of tension in people's minds. If you look on the right, you can just see some percentages up right in the slide. There's some numbers from the survey. In the survey, so even though more people in our focus group said they're relatively satisfied with public safety, but 72% did say that crime is a problem in the community. It's 65% said that local taxes are a problem. 93% said homelessness was a problem, and 93% said cost of living is a problem. So even though in our survey, crime was an issue, it's still lower than sort of affordability. Why don't you go next? In the focus groups, we had rich conversations, and people told us lots of different things. And some of the themes that we tried to highlight in this slide were just sort of risks, the challenges ahead of asking people for additional funding for services here in the county. And on one of the themes that emerged in our conversations in our focus groups was this sort of skepticism towards government and taxes. Now, some of that may be specific to Clark County. I'm sure that we definitely heard some specific things. But a lot of it is just a general sense of government not working in people's lives. And that could be at the city level, it could be at the county level, it could be at the state or national level. I have probably conducted over 600 focus groups in my career at this point. And without hyperbole, I'm sure that 95% of them, the word transparency comes up. Okay, so there is a strong desire for transparency. People told us that frequently. They want to know what the challenges are, what the county is doing to be a good steward of tax dollars. And also, if you push them on, have you been to a council meeting? Have you looked at the county budget? What have you done? Like, there's also a big gap there. And some of that's a challenge with communications, but some of it is just an expression of, gosh, I am untrusting of government nowadays. So one of the, I won't read all this, but like a comment, for example, on the lower left-hand here, this gentleman in Vancouver said, pretty much everybody here, we don't trust politicians to spend money the way they advertise to get what they want. it goes in the general fund and then they spend it in any way. It's just a representative sort of comment. And then we also heard, just sort of cost of living concerns. So given the financial strains people are currently facing, many voters are willing to support new taxes, especially when they're not addressing the top issue. So again, those top issues were things like homelessness. And so just another comment, I know the cost of living, they've increased the sales taxes, also the gas taxes went up at some point. I have to say no to something. Again, these are just sort of representative sort of comments that people had. Why don't you go next? So this comes from the survey. So this is among our 600 people we talked to across the county, and we asked them if they're familiar with the Clark County Jail or not. 37% said that they were familiar. 61% said that they're not familiar. We did not ask those who are familiar to give us descriptions of the familiarity. But I will say that 14% said that they're very familiar versus 37% said that they're not at all familiar. One of the blessings of doing good service is, you're taking problems away from having people have to think about them in their day-to-day lives. I mean, it's wonderful in a sense that people aren't familiar because we provided something that they don't have to think about. One of the challenges on the flip side of that is that if people don't, if you're doing a good job and people don't have to think about it, that they might not think that there is a problem. And so you could sort of interpret these numbers different ways. But I think going forward, one of the things between now and the future election is that people have to understand the conditions and why something needs to be addressed. And right now, we definitely see that there is a gap there. And if people, if you're asking them to fund something that's not their top priority and it's something that they're not familiar about, it's going to be difficult to get them to say yes. Oh, you go next. So this comes from the focus groups rather than the surveys. And so, we had conversations, like we asked them, have you heard, what have you heard about the Clark County Jail or anything? And they wrote some things down, and then they had a discussion. And, these sort of sizes of these circles are meant to sort of be representative of about the frequency of the comments. But the big one in the middle is, 21 people. So we had 40 people across our focus group said that, gosh, I haven't heard anything. And so it's not top of mind. They don't have much information. And even those who said something, some of them are just saying, I guess I know it's where it is, but they weren't talking about the condition or its age or anything like that. The green there is that, some positive comments, clean, good staff, has good services programs. The sort of more red on the right were some of the negative comments that people had. And just so you know, we did have people both in our survey and our focus groups had direct experience with the jails, either because they themselves had experienced interaction with the jail or family members or friends have as well. So not everybody who participated in the research was totally uninformed. Some had personal experience, but broadly, people are unfamiliar. Again, it's difficult to get people to say yes to increase their taxes for a service that's not a top priority and they don't know much about. But we can get there. But this is where we're starting from. So I'm going to go next. We wanted to give ourselves and you all some context of just how people think about jail, how they think about jail. So in the survey, we asked a number of questions where we gave people sort of, is it this or is it that? Understanding that the world is more complicated than the this or the that, but just try to get a feel for, directionally where do people land. To be realistic about how people are approaching the issue, but also help us inform things to emphasize in communications going forward. So one of the questions we asked in the survey was, Clark County Jail Services should be focused on holding offenders responsible for breaking laws and keeping people who are dangerous, keeping away people who are dangerous to the community, sort of more that accountability, responsibility side of things. And then the other was Clark County Jail Services should be focused on rehabilitation, including mental health care, treatment for drug and alcohol addiction, and support for return to the community, more on that rehabilitation side of things. Again, these things are not mutually exclusive in the real world, and I understand that, but we wanted to get a sense in Clark County, did people really land in one side or the other? Because if they did, that may be instructive for policy, but certainly would be instructive for communications. And what we find is basically is that, nearly evenly split on this question. If you go next, in our focus groups, some of this is just a smaller number of people, but in our focus groups, we're landed more on the accountability sort of side of this question. But to give an example, this is a good quote from a woman from Ridgefield. who really expressed, both sides of this at the same time. If the jail is only for incarceration and there is not and not there to move that person forward, then that person is going to stay or get worse in their situation. Obviously, it depends on the crime. I think accountability is critical when they release a lot of people into society that have committed severe crimes. If they don't want to hold these people accountable, then I think that the community suffers. On the accountability side, in the focus groups, we did hear quite a bit of people say that folks who are being arrested are being released quickly and being rearrested over and over again. I do not know if that's true or not true, but I do want to report to you that that sentiment existed in the community. And they kind of pointed fingers to different places. But to the extent that being able to talk about a expanded jail that can meet the community's needs, that might meet their need or they might resonate to that because it is something that many people in our focus groups expressed. So I go next. Now we're getting into can you go back one? Oh, I'm missing a slide in your deck. Did I go 2? Oh, I went forward 2. Thank you. I skipped too far. In our survey, thank you. We talked to people about if there's going to be jail, what are the things that are the priority for you? Again, there's important policy questions that go beyond what public opinion is, but this is where people sorted themselves on their own. And so we gave people 7 different things. We asked them, should they be a very high, medium, low, or very low priority? And we sort of grouped these here into the high, medium, and low priority buckets for the purposes of the chart. And the things that stood out at the top, kind of this top tier that really sort of was separate from the rest, were improving the design for safety of jail visitors and community partners, for jail staff, visitors, and community partners. Second, connecting incarcerated people to treatment and reentry services. Then more cells and beds to prevent overcrowding. And then housing designed to meet the needs of people with serious mental health problems. Below that, and you take a step down, is improving design and safety to meet legal ADA and constitutional standards. Obviously, that needs to be done. But if you're going to talk to the community, it's the second thing that they want to hear about, not the first thing they want to hear about. Housing designed to meet people with drug and alcohol addiction treatment. Again, it's not that it's unimportant. It's a lower priority than some of the other things. And then last, improve space for professional visitors such as lawyers, law enforcement officers, and community service providers. It's not in here, but I'll just say in our focus groups, in a description of the potential jail project, we used the word a modernized jail, and we got pretty strong pushback on that in the focus groups. It was a word choice that we used, so you can say DHM was to blame for that. But it was instructive because it was real clear that people had modest expectations about what the jail would be, wanted to be concerned about how much is spent in a way. So there's how you talk about it, sort of the vision that they have for this. Their pushback on the word modern isn't in this, but I think it's important to share here because that sort of captures that sort of gonna be careful with the dollars. Let me go next. So we get into funding. In the survey, we asked about go one more. We asked about funding for both capital and for operations. So for capital here, to fund construction for the Clark County Jail renovations and updates, would you support or oppose a property tax measure, which is estimated to cost the typical homeowner between $120 and $140 per year? We worked with the staff here to sort of get the correct estimates. You can see here we're at 44% support for that, 53% oppose. And I'd say importantly is that 38% strong oppose. It's strong oppositions, which tends to defeat measures. Those are the folks that are hard to move. I don't want you to look at these numbers and say that something can't be done. That's absolutely not the way that I would encourage you to interpret this. But also I think we should be clear-eyed that a lot of effort and community engagement is going to be necessary in order to move this from 44 to something to 50% plus 1. Yeah.
Was there another number? Were there other lower numbers used? Was there a break point in the numbers that people might
We
be
did
willing?
not get into a lot of price sensitivity in this. And so I know you're talking about the part for the full and partial. That would be something to consider. I can't say with certainty, right? Are people not want to invest a penny because they're concerned about property taxes or think that's the wrong mechanism? I think that's a lot of that 44%, right? But it just is likely not all of that 44%, right? There probably is some cost sensitivity. So something to be thoughtful of. In the focus groups, we asked, would you support or oppose some increase in local taxes for jail construction? So this isn't about property tax specifically. It's not about a dollar amount, just like in principle. Well, in principle, in our focus groups, people said, I'm willing to contribute something. So it does say, Counselor, that the mechanism might matter, the amount might matter, and what we tested with the property tax and the rate, that could have been the thing that got them too high. Because in the focus groups, people did not reject the idea, out of hand, that some resources might be needed. What they kind of the themes when they said we'll support it, but when they put some context around it, they said we want clear information about it. Safety improvements are needed across both operations and facilities. The community is and has been growing. That was probably the key one. Sort of this, when people saw that the jail had been built in 1984, people got it instinctively. The community's changed a lot in the last 40 years. And public safety has changed in the last 40 years. But because people don't know about the jail, most of them don't even know where it's located. They certainly didn't know when it was built or its size. And so seeing that really did get people to think, all right, we probably should do something. There's a lot of fuzziness about the something is, but that's why I think you get to that 30 here, is because a lot of it was just seeing when it was built, what its size was, and reflecting on the community and how much has changed since then. So now if you go one more, we're going to talk about sales tax, property tax, and a combo tax. I do want to call out that in this deck, we made an error. We got a little excited with our zeros, and it says 0.002% sales tax. It should be 0.02 sales tax. We've fixed that. Do know that our participants heard the right numbers, saw the right numbers. We just, sometimes you get something stuck in your head and you keep on doing it over and over again. That's what happened here, but we're getting that corrected. So I do want to call that out. But go once more. So in the sales tax, this is again from the survey. This is about operations. So to fund ongoing operations, the Clark County Jail, would you support or oppose a sales tax of 0.2%, which is about 2 cents on a $10 purchase? 57% said yes. Now I understand that we need both capital and operations, so it's a challenge. But on the sales tax, we do get a majority here. So there is definitely a difference in how people are conceiving the two mechanisms. It could be the amount that people are thinking they're paying. It could be the mechanism itself. It could be operations versus capital. There's some different things that might be going on there, but we did at least see some support there for sales tax. When I go next. And this is sort of the, excuse me, I appreciate it. To fund operations of the Clark County Jail, would you support or oppose a property tax measure, which is estimated to cost a typical homeowner $185 a year? So then we're at 30%. So it could be the mechanism, it could be property tax versus sales tax. It could be the amount that people are imagining that they're paying in sales tax versus what they might be paying in a property tax. It could be that with the property tax, we're being more concrete about what people would pay. We really can't do that with the sales tax. It's more challenging to do that. But we do see a pretty big drop in their willingness to fund operations with a property tax versus a sales tax. Let me go next. And so this is sort of the combo here. That to fund the ongoing operations of the Clark County Jail, would you support or oppose a combination of a sales tax of 0.1% and a property tax measure, which is estimated to cost a typical homeowner $110 per year? So here we're saying a little bit lower in the sales tax and a little bit lower in the property tax. If we did both of those, where are you at? And then we're at 44%. Okay. So it probably is something about the property tax. It's just a little bit tricky to know if it's the amount or the mechanism, but there seem to be a problem with that as a option for voters. Why don't you go next? So the green here are those who said, I support a construction measure. So these are capital people. And then the orange are people who opposed a a construction measure. And just to show that even the sales tax did better even with those who oppose the construction measure. So the sales tax is better with everybody. It's just sort of the way to think about this. So I go next. This comes from the focus group. So we asked the same questions in the focus group. So this is the sales tax. Again, we see a majority of people saying in their focus groups that they would support a sales tax, sort of expressed in the same way. So just some comments that people had. I would support it. I have a priority in public safety. If you don't have safety in the community, so this is the person who's concerned about safety, they saw this as a safety measure, they would support it for that purpose. Another person said, everybody is paying it unless you're going to cross the bridge. Everyone has to be in it for it to work. Can't be one set of people. This was someone who was, we hear this a lot in focus groups with property taxes, where there's some sense that renters don't pay. Of course, typically, I think most people think that this is passed on through rents, but sort of they don't pay directly. So this was person saying like, oh, good, it's not just homeowners who are paying, everybody's going to be contributing. That was an attribute of the sales tax. And then the 2 cents on $10 or 20 cents on $100 or $2 on $1,000. It's not that much. In order to raise the sales tax, it'd have to be some sort of compromise with the gas tax. So this person is saying, yeah, sales tax isn't that much as you expressed it, but was also upset about the gas tax and looking for some sort of balance on that. So people don't see these things in isolation. Okay? So I go next. Of our minority of people who said that they would, in our focus groups, said they would oppose the sales tax, these are the sorts of things we heard. Didn't we just raise the sales tax not too long ago? It's crazy. It's going up more. 2 cents, but I'd do 1 cent. It's not too much. So this person wanted to negotiate on that 1 cent versus 2 cents. And next person said, I just think it's a low priority. As I've said, we need to fund education, and we are going to pay for a fancy jail for criminals, is what somebody said. I will say that we heard a lot about education funding in the focus groups. Concerns about programs and services being cut, concerns about levies not passing. And, this person is really expressing, hey, if you're giving me a choice between education or a jail, my priority is somewhere else, not a jail. And how long does this go on for? This sort of person thinking this sales tax you're asking about is going to go on and on and on forever. Why don't you go next? Just to give you a sense of the demographics. So of those who supported both the construction and operations, who are they? They're more likely to be Democrats, they're more likely to be white, and they're more likely to be women. Now, just to give you a sense, as we kind of move forward and think about communications and who we need to outreach, like the supporters, these are the groups who we're likely to be supportive. And if you go next, those who are only in the operations side only. So they said I'd support some operations, but they did not support some capital measure. Again, they're more likely to be Democrats. They're more likely to be infrequent voters, which is maybe good for a general election rather than a primary special election. Slightly more likely to be younger, slightly more likely to be Hispanic, and slightly more likely to be in that middle income, that 100 to 150K. Let me go next. I keep on turning 2 pages. Thank you. In the survey, we gave people a number of different reasons that they might support funding for a jail. These are just shorthands. They actually had longer sort of statements, but these get to the nub of it. And so if you just look at this before we even look at the individual items, we found things to say that our survey respondents responded to positively. Even our worst performing statement, 60% of our respondents thought that was a good reason to support funding. So the top performing statements were safer work conditions for jail staff. Right. So it wasn't the inmates, so it wasn't necessarily safety outside the jails. It was about the staff themselves. There's an appreciation for the good work that the staffers doing, and they want to make sure that they're protected, and that showed up here. Reduce costly out-of-county jail rentals. So we did tell people, if the jail doesn't have capacity, there has to be these agreements with other counties, and that costs money. So sort of being a good steward. an adequate jail for capacity for arrests. I will say that even though that's slightly lower than our, that total good for the ones above, it's the statement that had the greatest strong support, or a very good reason, I should say. And certainly that would be true with our focus groups, I think, too. Like there was this idea that, we just like, in order to have good public safety, we have to have space for those who are a danger to our community. And like, that is the thing that, of those who have strong feelings, that's the thing that they have strongest feelings about. Want to go next? In the focus groups, given that most voters are unfamiliar with the jail and its conditions, they tend to prioritize outcomes and improve jail safety outside the jail than inside the jail. And the idea here is most people don't know about the jail. They don't really know what it's doing, its size, its age, or anything else. But what they do know about is their day-to-day lives. And they want to understand how their life, their community, their families are going to see an impact in a positive way with the funding. So they wanted to ensure that there's enough space in the jail as the community grows. They want to know how this might have an impact on crime rates and improve public safety. So these are the outside things. And then the inside, they have concern about overcrowding. They have concern about staff. They want to improve services. But even so, drawing that connection between how those things are inside the jail that are improving are going to benefit the community outside the jail, that's what's really key, particularly when they have little information, and this isn't a particularly salient issue for them. Then next, for those who, we ask people like, gosh, what are some reasons maybe that you would oppose this? This comes from our jail funding survey, and the number one reason or thing that responded to the things we presented was just taxes, the expense of the taxes. So 77% said the tax burden on families was a good or very good reason to oppose this, including 51% who says it's a very good reason. So that cost sensitivity is certainly real. And then less for the other ones. And then next, again, the focus groups, they don't necessarily have a lot of clarity about the Clark County Jail, but they had some notions about incarcerations and jails in general. And I present this just to think about how we're going to talk about the challenges that the current jail has and the potential benefits that it might have, or the reasons to make these investments. So people were able to sort of talk about, I'm putting this in air quotes, but what a bad jail is. But it's overcrowded, it has limited staff, it has disgruntled staff. So one way to think about this, like in terms of communication, is like the staff at the jail are probably going to be very good communicators about the conditions, because people want to make sure, we saw earlier, that they are taken care of and their safety is taken care of. And that would be a condition of a bad jail. A bad jail doesn't have the mental health resources. It's not getting people prepared for return. So there's many repeat offenders. That's that outside of the jail thing. Then you can sort of flip those things on their head, and you sort of get what people are looking for. They're looking for proof of reducing recidivism, for example. They're looking for proof of adequate resources for those who are incarcerated, a respectful staff, a happy staff, humane conditions. So again, this is going to be helpful in thinking about how do we communicate about the benefit of doing something for the jail. And then next, all the voters are more likely to support than oppose all funding measures, asks in the focus group. A test of a more official ballot language is needed to understand the appetite and risk. So in our focus groups, when people had an opportunity to think and talk about the issue, hear different perspectives, they were more supportive of funding measures than we heard in our survey, which to me says, the survey is probably telling us where people are starting. The focus groups tells us where they could get. But I just say, like, we did not test specific ballot language in the survey. That's something that would have to emerge, and that could make a difference. And then lastly, just sort of at the end of our focus groups, we always ask people for their advice. So we say, you are experts. You've been thinking about this for a couple hours. You've been looking at the details. What is your advice to county leadership? And I won't read these all, but we heard things about build better trust, show accountability. Someone said, I'd love to see a community advisory board. That really has to get that trust and accountability. more public meetings, transparency, and being evidence-based. Again, I know that the good work that David and his team has done, and we're having meetings like this, there is a lot of ability to get information and there is transparency, but we are hearing that there's a gap there that needs to be filled, and that's a big part of their final advice. So with that, I will pause, and I'm happy to address any questions you might have.
Wow. Thank you very much for this. I did have an opportunity to watch one of the focus
Oh, great.
groups, so it was very interesting, and there was a lot more information you really could have added here, but this is plenty for us to chew on. Any comments or questions from
Chair.
council? Yes,
Chair, I have
please.
some comments. This was awesome and so thorough. I was thinking about it. I have toured the jail 3 times, and then I attended a luncheon there a year ago. And until you see it for yourself, you just cannot understand it, I don't think, because of the age of the jail. The comment about fancy jail, that's not what we're trying to do here. So I could see where if you haven't seen it, you might be under the impression that's what we're going for. But I think the community also well, you mentioned too, like once you say the building was built in 1980, was it 84, kind of gives you an idea of like what that might look like. I know the first time that I toured the jail, there were a couple of things that were going on as far as repairs. It was very difficult for them to do some like fencing repairs because the structure of what was originally there was very old. And then some of the repairs would even take longer because they had to be customized because of the age of the facility. So which is not safe for the people who work there or the inmates, depending on what's happening there. So I think, I'm not sure how we're going to share that with the public, but having them see maybe some photographs of the jail in specific areas, I think personally would be helpful if you haven't seen it for yourself. But thank you for this information. It was great. It was good to see people's opinions too.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, go ahead, Councilor
Sure.
Quinn.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for this presentation. It's very thorough and it gives us a lot to think about, right? And I'm inclined to agree with my colleague about until you're actually in the jail to see what the conditions are like, it's very difficult to really understand what the need is. Now, I had a chance to tour Washington County Jail. At that time, I think it was like 5 or 6, 7 years old. This is a while back. And there's a big difference between Washington County Jail in Oregon and what the jail here looks like. I think the dungeon in the Tower of London looks more inviting than this particular jail. So, I hate that you have to work there under these conditions. And, we care a lot about the people that work there, obviously, inmates as well. So it's important to make sure that we get this passed. But this is going to give us a lot to think about in terms of how people think and whether or not it's something that they can support. And to Councilor Belcott's point, images or even videos, put on YouTube of what the conditions of the jail look like might be very, very helpful to get a different perspective. But I don't know if we're going to provide direction today, but this is a lot of information to consume at this point, at least for me.
Go ahead.
I have quite a few, so go ahead, Chair. Maybe some of them will be answered.
Well,
for you.
I just wanted to follow up on, I think it was slide 28, as far as the test of more official ballot language, if that could be something when we get around to having official ballot language that we could follow up with, that could help guide us in how we use language.
That's like decision for kind of just like, it is not unusual for a community to want to do some research to be able to figure out what is the most effective way to draft a ballot measure. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Councillor Young, go ahead. Yes, I think there's more as far as direction. I think we are going to
Okay.
try and provide some direction today.
Right. So I had a number of questions, and perhaps maybe you can send us the actual questions that were asked, because I think that it can hold a lot of context. And You know, for example, I looked at the homelessness question and, you know, the answer that they gave, like you can ask, do you, you know, I think the question was like, do you believe in services for folks that are homeless or something like that? But then it could also be asked, do you agree with the policy direction and the, you know, the actual way that we're handling homelessness? So anyway, if we could get those questions, that could give me a little bit more context, that would be great. And then I saw one little nugget on there that may indicate that you did, but did you kind of sort and track the people that you were speaking to based on their level of propensity in when they vote?
Yes, so it's not in this deck here. The full report is going to have more demographic breakdowns. But yes, we in the voter file is information about vote history, and we're able to look at the results by vote frequency.
Okay.
So it is important as you think about, you know, election timing. If there is differential support among frequent versus less frequent voters, that could be instructive for making that decision on timing.
Okay, and then I saw a lot of stuff, so I'm pretty sure it's available per jurisdiction as well.
Yeah. We have we have the geographic and district breakdown as well. Yeah. There's a full set of crosstabs if you're interested. That's probably at 250 pages. I imagine.
I'm sure Councilor Young would like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Got that one. So, you know, I was wondering, like, and this may not be a question for you. I think this is a discussion that we'll need to have later on, but some of the comments regarding transparency, I think are something that we need to really talk about. I mean, we have the history here of before body cams were approved, we had, you know, the ballot. It's not that we weren't being transparent, but there was, you know, confusion about what the ask was, and it failed, you know, and then we turned around and made it very clear exactly what it was for, and it passed. So some of those conversations we're going to have in the near future here. But I do have one question for you, and that is, you know, body cams happen. Vancouver passed a levy lid lift for public safety, but it failed the first time. When you put it forward to the voters and perhaps maybe it fails, does that create actually more education awareness to where the second time it's more likely to be successful? What happens when you do put it on the ballot and it fails?
I'll speak to my experience. A failed measure can fail in a way that's not productive for the community. That is within the universe of possibilities. But an election is one of the most effective ways to make an issue salient for a community where they're paying attention to it, and it's the opportunity where they're going to probably learn more than anything else that you can do. To be realistic about these numbers, I think that there is a path to success, but I'm not telling you by any stretch that is certain. As you think about your planning, I would strongly encourage you to think about the likelihood that something does not pass, and then what does it look like the day after. So it's not just a plan up to election day, but it is running past that as well, in case this is not successful. I've worked with communities that have had failed measures, and then had the opportunity to do research with them to understand with the voters what they heard, what they learned, where they got that information, what they thought the thing was about, why they voted yes or no, and that communities have been able to make adjustments to be successful the second time around.
Okay.
I also am very realistic about the pain of putting something on the ballot and not being successful. So I don't want to be naive about that, but I would agree with you that a campaign is one of the most effective ways to engage the community in an issue.
Okay. And then I was wondering if you had a little bit more detailed information or could direct it to me. You know, we are discussing the issue of potentially asking the voter also to backfill the structural deficit that we have. And I did see some information, you know, like some of the comments from people that, you know, they pass the tax for something and then they just shove it into the general fund. You know, so I think, you know, we need to be very, very strategic and thoughtful about how we communicate with the community on this and to what level that we look at. But
Councilor Young, I don't think that's what's being proposed to backfill.
The structural deficit,
No.
right? We're talking about the jail right now, but some of this has to do with our previous work session, what we talked
That
about.
was our previous work session, but
Right.
we'd be looking at how to fund the jail, and we're not, doesn't have anything to do with.
Well, it does
backfilling.
in the sense that the entire thing, I mean, we're going to we're going to have multiple asks from folks. And I think it's important that all of them are able to be successful. And so if we just look at them at isolated, particular projects, we may end up only passing part of it and not the whole thing. So I do think it's important that messaging, and it goes back to transparency. What do we plan to do with these dollars specifically?
If I could clarify,
please.
so the direction we're looking at, anything that goes out to or potentially could go out unless council, wants to go a different direction, is capital for the jail, maybe the sheriff's office, and staffing for the jail and the sheriff's office. None of that is tied to the structural deficit. Those would be for additional services. We already have a criminal justice sales tax that council's already implemented that we may be able to use some of that capacity to address the structural deficit. But the items that could be on the ballot are not tied to the structural deficit.
Understood. It's just a kind of how you look at it. But yes, okay.
Well, I think how the voters will look at it, they don't want to be funding a structural deficit. They want to be paying, that's not what
Understood.
we're going to be asking.
So then the other question I ask is, was there any attempt to go through the survey and then maybe educate them on some of the issues and then ask the question again? Did that change your understanding of it? Did that change your support level of it?
We didn't do a retest in the survey. There's certainly an education component. So we did in the survey and the focus groups give a statement that describes kind of the background. And then those messaging statements, they're shorthand. And then when you get the full questionnaire, you'll see the longhand. Like they're intended to provide information about like why this might be a benefit, including like its age or like what it's going to return to the community. So there's an education component in that as well. In the focus groups, what really stood out, like when people had the opportunity to like say, this is how I'm thinking about it. They just simply had no idea how old it was. They didn't understand the need at all. So like it wasn't that complicated. It was, this is 40 years old. It was built at a time when the community is much smaller. And I'm not surprised that 40 years on that we would need to make some improvements and increase its size. Like those were sort of the key things about why yes, right? There were some reasons why no too, which is it's expensive. It's not a high priority for me relative to other things. But the why yes was really driven in, yeah, I sort of get it. This is old. And then the thing that is less in the information that we presented to them, but that they would very much like to know is how is this going to improve safety in the community? That's sort of the piece that in the research we were unable to say. But I think it's very clear from the people we talked to, in order to be successful, they're going to need a good answer to that question. Yeah.
Makes sense. All right. Thank you. That is all of my questions.
Okay, I'm just looking at the time, and I think the expectation was that we provide some direction as far as next step and funding strategies and what we may put out to the voters.
You have some options. So you can continue to have the discussion now and provide the direction. We could continue this discussion after council time today, if you would like to do that. Or we can set even a special meeting with a 24-hour notice. So we could do it like Monday morning or whatever, if you need more time to digest what was presented and then provide the direction. But yes.
Okay, I've experienced that if we go too far past noon, it's hard to come back around at 1 o'clock and continue that meeting or start that meeting. What would the council like to do? Do you want to just start what the options might be or look at what the county manager is recommending? Or do you want to just have lunch, do our council time, and then talk about this later? Council time agenda is rather short, light.
Yes, there's not a lot.
Oh, okay, feedback.
Oh, I guess my question, if we decide to continue this after or during council time, will they be here so that we can ask additional questions? You, okay.
Dave will be here, and I believe the sheriff will be here.
What about the consultant?
I can stay here till about 1:30.
Oh, yeah, well, probably. That probably wouldn't work then.
That wouldn't work, but if we have additional questions, we can follow up with you.
Chair,
Yes.
I would prefer to continue on, but I'm okay, delaying it to council time so folks can have lunch. But I would just process wise, I mean, don't we need to like essentially continue the work session and then delay council time, because it doesn't really become a part of council time because we didn't put that
No.
on the agenda.
It would be continuing it till after council time because council time has been noticed for 1:00.
Okay, so 1:30
Correct.
is iffy, then we're getting to
I-
it. Okay.
I'd prefer to just discuss the options and keep going if possible, because I agree with you, Chair. It is kind of hard to come back after council.
I would be okay coming out, continuing after council time. But I think we'll forego I'm just afraid we'll forego our lunch and just bleed right into council time. So, let's say you.
I would support a continuation after council time.
I would say it's kind of 2 to 2, so I will let the chair make that determination.
Oh, okay. Well, let's continue
So
after.
I'll support the chair's recommendation.
Thank you. Let's continue after council time, assuming council time won't take as long as it has sometimes. So, sounds good. And we
Chair.
can digest what we've heard and come back. Yes,
One
go ahead.
one question, would it be helpful and could we in our procedures perhaps alter the agenda for council time to put public comment later so that we can focus on just something to consider while we're in our break?
We'll hold our council time and then we'll continue our work session after council time. So I think the public comment is part of council time.
And it's a very light agenda, so I don't anticipate it will take too long to get through council time.
Okay, it sounds like that's the plan. All right, well, so thank you very much for all this wealth of information. We will conclude our work sessions and reconvene at 1 for council time.
And just to clarify, we're continuing the work session.
Continuing,
Not
yes,
concluding. Thank
we're
you.
not closing the work session. It'll continue after council time. So without objection, we're adjourned for now.